Oh, okay.
Usually the room is full. I don't know where everybody is today, unless they're away for 4th of July.
They
holiday.
might have.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll see, because it's not quite time yet, but they'll show up.
But if we close our eyes more, we'll.
That
show
happens every time.
Oh. Jill?
Yeah.
Jill?
Awesome. Okay. Maybe we'll wait a few minutes to start this time because the meditation is a quiet thing.
You know, if you guys have parked out in the sun, want to park under some of the covered parking, nobody's going to run you off on Sunday. So
All right, I wasn't sure.
help yourself. Park where-
I parked in the shade.
I parked inside.
You parked in the sun?
Yeah.
You can go back
Yeah,
to
you
the
should go
sun.
park under the shade. Yeah, go for it. We'll wait a few minutes to start.
All right. Thanks.
Oh, hey, Esther. Esther's on. We have our Sunshine Coast, Australia. Yeah. Oh, it's like 8:30 in the morning for her.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Faye, do you take yoga classes? Do you take yoga classes? What? Yoga? Do you take yoga? Yoga classes?
Shall I give this to
I,
you
yeah.
Yes.
Where?
tomorrow?
Well, I'm a yoga teacher. Oh, you're a yoga teacher?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm not taking any classes, I'm just doing it on my own. I do Kundalini yoga.
I see. Thank you.
Kundalini.
Yeah,
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been doing it for
Oh,
10 years, almost 10 years now.
okay. Wonderful. And that's how you ended up at the Om Fest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got to Yoga Fest because I have a product, so. I
Oh, you were a
was
vendor there.
vendor,
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul's a yoga teacher too.
She met me at the Om Fest. She was there. She was there too. Yeah. That's my mom over there.
Were you doing the yoga classes at the?
Yeah, Paul is my son, so I went especially for his class.
That's your mom?
Yeah.
No way. Wow. Wow.
Now-
Oh my gosh, you're so lucky.
I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
Oh,
I'm very lucky.
you're so sweet. Thank you so much.
Oh, my mom passed away, but she passed away when I first started doing all of this. She was just flipping out during a cold, what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So we never really reconciliated that. But my mother's name is Gita,
Oh,
so I'm Gita's daughter.
Okay.
I'm Angelina.
What's that?
I
Yeah,
said
yeah.
my mother's name is
Yeah.
Gita,
So you're Gildiana.
and I'm Gita's daughter.
Yeah,
I
Gildiana.
really am.
oh.
Oh, Gilda M.
Mhm.
I thought it was like Peter's, well, that was father's, because her name was Pedrolia. So that was daughter of Peter.
We'll give it a couple more moments before we start. Faye, if Genevieve did not tell you how we broadcast here, I'll let you know that we have one camera here that we like to place the camera on our audience whenever there's a question, so our online students and our online participants can hear and see who's talking. And we have several people that are online with us. Okay, and there's a microphone there and one here, and we have people that are participating on Facebook as well. So.
Oh, how wonderful.
Aha, one more.
I hear somebody.
Come on down.
Rhonda there.
You're-
Yep, she's there.
How are you?
So much for Steve, I guess he
Hi.
forgot.
Hi.
Okay, the ladies on vacation.
Yeah, two are they're away.
Yeah.
One's husband is in St. Rose getting something removed.
Oh.
And I don't know about Jerry. I think they tried to tie in with the
Did you
time
announce to the
along
people online that we're going to be?
I wrote it there.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
start in 6 minutes. All right. Oh, we're just waiting a couple minutes to start. We're expecting one or two more people. Sorry. One more. You can do this now. What do you choose? Laura, another yogi friend that Mom's gonna give a book to.
LAV. Oh, Laura.
You've taken a few notes, haven't you?
Huh?
You've taken a few notes, I see, haven't you?
Yeah.
Somebody's coming, one more,
Mm.
two more maybe. All right.
Hey, what's up, Jillian?
Is that restaurant out here too? The restaurant?
There was a restroom. It's right.
Oh, yeah,
That way.
one of the things I haven't mentioned to people, there's restrooms around in the back, either way. Men's are on this side, the women are on that side. That was a good time. Let me make sure the lights are on.
How are you, Jill?
Good, how are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too. Hi, Jill.
Did you hear about Zeke's hands-on assist training that's coming up next weekend?
Yeah, and I was gonna maybe do it, and then I realized it was the advanced one.
So what? Do it. I'm doing it.
Because I'm gonna do the first one.
No, jump in. Come on.
No,
Let's do
no.
it. It's open for everybody. You're a teacher. You're a yoga
That's not
teacher.
true. It said advanced.
It did,
said
but
it's
but
take the first one.
I don't think so. You're positive you have to take the first one?
I think so.
You should do it. You should do it. No, you should do it.
It doesn't matter. You'll take the next one with me. 'Cause
Maybe.
you'll just wanna- How many times have you taken it?
3. This is the fourth, but this is the first time of the advanced one.
Yeah.
Do it.
So you're gonna tell us who you are, or is it gonna be a secret?
Oh, you met her before. She's been
Yeah.
here. This is Jillian.
Yeah.
Julian, oh,
Oh,
okay.
I. No one ever recognizes me when I actually do something with myself.
So you
Yes.
don't need another book?
I have one at home. I just
Okay.
didn't bring mine.
All right, let us get started. It is 2:37. We've been keeping our online students waiting. Okay. If everyone's okay, we'll go ahead and begin with our short meditation. We have several students online. Oh, yes, let's silence our cell phones, please. And actually, the do not disturb is better if you know how to put the little moon mode on, because then it doesn't vibrate either. So vibrations sometimes are loud also. So just a request to turn all the noise making capabilities off, please, whether it's beeping or buzzing.
I don't know how to do that, I'll put it the other way.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, the moon mode?
Moon mode. It's called do not disturb. That's the moon right there. So if anything comes in, it doesn't vibrate, it doesn't beep or anything. So.
No one can ever bother you.
All right, let's go ahead and just harmonize ourselves for a moment here. Okay, sit up tall. Close the eyes. Take a few deep breaths slowly. Just let your awareness settle onto this tone, the tone of the bell. Let the body relax. Notice if you're clenching or tensing any muscles that don't need to be tensed. Keep following the sound of the bell. Invite the intention into your mind of harmonizing and synchronizing our collective energies for the purpose of spiritual study, spiritual growth. Just intend to create that space, that objective. Let's chant Om 3 times. Inhale. Very nice. Okay, let's come back slowly. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 ohms to get everyone on the same tone or pitch. And it was good. By the last one, we were all evenly vibrating and it felt nice. I think you picked up the bass note on that one, right? You were picked up the low end. Yeah.
Just to switch it up.
Yeah. There's always the bass player that leans way back and plays the bass. That was Terry, coming from a past life rock star. In my current life, I'm a yogi.
Yeah. And
We still play for Christmas. We're still rock stars around Christmas. Has anyone received our Christmas rock star video? Yeah. Okay. We still have some material to cover from the last chapter. So our third meeting on the last chapter now. So chapter 5, let's finish up chapter 5, which is life after death. That should only take us probably a quarter or a third of our time today, and then we'll dive into chapter 6. The life after death chapter is proven to be a very, very juicy and involved topic, and that's why it's taken us now three meetings to finish the material. So, okay, to our friends online and in person, of course, if there's anything specific that you'd like to recap regarding the process of dying and the different koshas or bodies that our consciousness moves through after the physical body dies, just let us know and we'll address those specifically. Otherwise, we'll continue with the discussion. We left off in the emotional or astral body, or kosha. And everyone, please chime in if there's any questions or requests for clarification, as always. So just a very quick recap. The physical body is the most dense part of ourselves, and that's the first aspect of our being to die when we die. The physical body begins to shut down and decay and cease to vibrate. The etheric body, or the pranamaya kosha, is the second level more removed, the second vehicle that is active after the physical body dies. And that part of ourselves is connected to the physical body through a cord that is snapped or cut or broken when the physical body dies. So our consciousness moves into that part of ourselves, our energetic body, our prana vehicle, also known as the etheric double, which is the topic of this book that we quoted from last session a little bit. So several names for that body: the etheric double, the pranamaya kosha, or your energy body. After a period of time of our consciousness existing in that vehicle of ours, then that part of us begins to disintegrate and cease to exist also, and then our consciousness moves higher into the astral or emotional vehicle. That is part of what in Vedantic terminology is referred to as the Manomaya kosha. Now, in Vedantic or Indian Hindu tradition, the astral vehicle or the emotional body and the mental body is referred to as the same thing. That's one of the differences between Theosophy teachings and Indian Hindu teachings. So Manomaya kosha means mental body, but in Theosophy we break that into several different sub-bodies. The astral or emotional being the part of ourselves that has to do with emotions. And the reason why it's called astral, that term astral comes from, is it Greek, astron? Or
Stars.
I
Exactly.
don't remember.
It's from
I think it is
Greek astron, which means star-like. Exactly, Faye. And the reason why it's called the astral or star-like body is because the environment where that part of us exists is very attractive and glimmery and magnetic and emotional, right? So our emotions, that's where emotions exist. We become attracted to things, the magnetic qualities of things that we want, that we feel like we need, and things that also repel us. That's all emotional wants and needs.
And that's where glamour exists.
Yes, that was the word I was searching for. Glamour, exactly. So star-like, shiny things that we want. If anyone's read our book, The Story of the Magic Toy, is all about the development of our emotions and what part emotions play in our development. So our consciousness exists at that level for a while. As our emotional energy is resolved after our physical body dies, our emotional energy has to be resolved and calmed and eliminated as a completion to this incarnation. However many years we spent in the physical body, whether it's 10 years or 110 years, there's a certain amount of emotional energy that we build up, or a certain amount that we don't build up based on your awareness of your emotions during your incarnation. And that is the key point. Sure, go ahead.
One thing that we failed to point out in the last class is that for those who die prematurely, either through an accident or an act of violence or self-violence, suicide, that the period that is spent in Kamaloka, the emotional world, will be as long as what that person would have lived normally. So regardless of any other factors, they probably are going to have quite a long period in Kamaloka because of that. That lifetime was supposed to be a certain length of time, as we pointed out. And if it's cut short, then that's made up during the Kamaloka period.
I think we did mention the term Kamaloka last time, but let's define it again. Kama is a Sanskrit word that means desire or wants, needs. It can also be referred to as love, but love as an emotion. So Kama, desire, Loka, place, the place of desires, which is the astral world.
And Loka is a Sanskrit word, and yet we find the derivation in English and many other words. Location. In Spanish, it's lugar. And in other languages, it's something very similar. So the fact that this language that existed in India thousands of years ago affected our language today is quite amazing. That's why that group of languages is called Indo-European languages.
The key point we want to keep reiterating about this Kamaloka is that this is where many religions get their idea or the teaching of heaven, of hell. This concept of Kamaloka. And the idea comes from the experience of a person who lived a life full of wild emotions. Uncontrolled desires and emotional roller coaster type existence during your physical life results in an experience in Kamaloka that's not pleasant. Because all the emotion, all the energy that is created, all the vibrations that are activated during a physical life have to be resolved somehow. And this is the time that they're resolved. And the period of time spent in Kamaloka, it's just your consciousness. It's not anything physical. It's just an awareness of the same types of emotions that were generated in life. They need to dissipate. And if there's a lot of emotions that we generate every day on a habitual basis for 70 years, for example, that will take a while to dissipate. This is the key teaching here. We can prepare for that experience after death by understanding and learning to control our emotions now. All right. Let's see. We also want to reiterate that this experience, although as unpleasant as it may be for some people, it is not a punishment. And this is kind of in a response to what religions teach about going to hell. It's not a punishment by any outside deity or authority. You know, it's not a judgment that, hey, you were a bad person, you're going to experience pain and suffering, fire and brimstone for a period of time after death. It's not that at all. It's a result of natural law. It's cause and effect. It's karma.
it's no different from the cause and effect that come about with gravity. If you're standing on a cliff and through not paying attention, you step back and fall to your death, you're not being punished because you made a mistake. It's just nature. Nature is much more severe than a lot of people are. We tend to cut people a lot of slack, but nature doesn't. It exacts exactly what is due because of people's choices in life or their inattention.
So Theosophy teaches that this period of time could be 20 to 40 Earth years that a person experiences the Kama Loka state until their energy, the emotional energy, has been resolved. And this is also the period of the after-death state where mediumship occurs. Now, we spent the majority of last session on mediums and on contacting the dead, and we don't want to go into that again, except for one thing. I want to reiterate our stance on that again, just so it's crystal clear. We had a lot of going back and forth on whether or not it's important to, whether or not it's good to, whether or not it's part of our own dharma or purpose to receive messages and contact the dead. And I'd like to reiterate the position of Theosophy is that it is not generally helpful to either the person who has died nor to the medium who's contacting the person that has died. Not helpful for several reasons. And just quickly, the person the person that has died is in a transitory period. And if we make an effort to contact the person, whatever the message we think we're getting, however helpful it may seem, we're creating a connection and a magnetism back to the physical world for that person who is transitioning out. And what we're learning from Theosophy and from the wise teachers that founded the Theosophical Society is that we need to let them make their progress. We need to let them go. Thank you. For lack of a better word, let them go. It's the idea of vairagya. We always come back to this non-attachment thing. Not easy, but this is the teaching. And some people say, well, the messages come naturally and they contact me all the time. Well, of course, we can't say whether or not the messages are for you personally are helpful or whether your connection to the dead person is helpful. It's the general rule that unless you're just giving them assistance and a prayer without any emotional attachment on your part, it's not very beneficial. So going a little bit deeper into that, we have evidence from mediums that it's a complete drain on the energy of the person contacting the dead, complete drain and almost an unuseful use of their energy. Okay. Anything you want to add to that before we put it to rest?
One last thing that
Okay.
we didn't cover, and that is children who die
Okay, sure.
before the age of accountability, which is approximately 8 years old. 7, 8 years old is when a person has developed enough in the current incarnation that they are now responsible for their choices. They generally know right from wrong by that age. Up until that time, they haven't generated any karma in this lifetime. So quite often, if they die through an accident or from other causes, they may, it's not always, but they may come back relatively quickly without going through the Kamaloka and Devachan periods. And if that is the case, they may also come back with the same emotional vehicle and mental vehicle. So as we will learn as we're learning in this class, most of us drop each of those at a certain point. But in this specific case, they can come back with the same vehicles. And that's thought to be one of the reasons that a few young people, children, remember something from a previous life. They may remember a house or certain people or certain events that took place. And as they get older, those memories fade and they don't remember it anymore. But that is what is thought to be the cause of those memories that some children have. So just one more thing to be aware of.
Esther in Australia asks about abortion. She says the abortion debate.
Yeah, HPB was adamantly against abortion. She called it feticide. Feticide. She absolutely was of the opinion that if there is a fetus growing, that there is a soul that is waiting to occupy that body, and that there is karma involved in it. There's a whole series of events that are meant to take place, and that if we purposely cut that short, then we're interfering with nature, basically. So she did not address the possibility of rape, for example, or incest, or any of the even more horrible events that can be involved in making that decision. So we don't have any information on that from her point of view. And in fact, just to be real quick, Annie Besant, before she became a theosophist, was an ardent proponent for women's rights and for the rights of the working class. And she felt that birth control was a real important and necessary part of that. So when she joined the Theosophical Society, she and HPB clashed as far as their opinions on that. And eventually Annie Besant gave in and changed her views to match those of HPB. But a number of years later, she kind of went back to her former way of thinking about it. So again, all we can do is present what other people have said. I don't judge anybody that has to make that sort of decision. It's a very personal and a very difficult decision to make. And all we can do is give support to anybody that is in that position and not be judgmental.
I hope Esther was able to hear that. Do you have a question? Do you mind if we put the camera on you?
I don't know if I have exactly the question, or maybe it's a question, but it feels like if the child who is to be born chose this particular mother who is going to go through the abortion, is it possible that it's maybe a specific lesson for that soul to be actually learn, and this is why I chose that particular mother, versus going through, in a sense, accepting everything as it is, and it happened that this particular parent chose to abort this particular child. So there is two paths kind of like intersecting at the same time. That's just kind of feels, as you were sharing this philosophy, I was just receiving this other side. So there is the part of this baby soul, and then there is the part of this woman's soul, why she's choosing to make the decision that she is making at this point. Obviously, she's making that decision because she feels that's the best thing for her to do at this moment, which is not being vicious to this child. And at the same time, the part of the child choosing this particular mother, and how these two souls are serving each other.
It's almost certain that those two individuals as souls have karma together, and that there are some things that are intended to be worked out during that lifetime. I don't know if a person is completely unaware of that, though. They may make a decision based on their personal needs and not so much on the what would have happened in the life of that. The assumption maybe in some cases is maybe they assume they're not religious, though, so they don't believe that it's actually a soul, or that there is reincarnation, or that there is any karma involved. And even if they do, they may feel like that they will be born, that soul will be born to someone else, and they may even have a better life. So there's many different things that they may be considering. But from HPB's point of view, each one is an individual soul, and they are interfering with what would have been the natural sequence of events. Just as much as, for example, if we commit suicide, or if we take the life of another individual, we're interfering with the natural flow of life.
This idea of karma is so fascinating to ponder and contemplate. The next chapter, chapter 7, is all about karma. But as you become more aware and sensitive to these concepts, you'll realize that every action that we do causes a vibration that will come back to us in some way. And then we take it a step further and realize, wow, the situations I find myself in are those vibrations, those energies coming back to me from things that happened in the past. And taking it a step further, you realize, oh, wait a minute, what could I have done to cause this? Well, it was most likely not even in this lifetime. And that's where the explanatory power of reincarnation comes in. When you start pondering these things, you realize, wow, everything has a reason and a purpose. And I can start becoming the maestro of my world by creating the actions I want to create now in order to receive the results I want later. It's fascinating stuff.
As we grow in understanding and awareness, not only do we see how life works more accurately, but we become more responsible for everything that we do. Because not only are we making actions, but we're doing them with more understanding than we had before.
Mm-hmm.
We might be able to say, well, I didn't know any better. But as we grow, what is the saying? From those to whom much is given, much is required. Not just expected, but required. So the more understanding that you have, the more that is required of you to use that understanding appropriately and wisely.
That's why in our justice system there are different punishments for different kinds of manslaughter. The premeditated kind is worse than involuntary because it's all about the intention. And when we know more, we got to do more. This becomes evident when you start looking at problems in life. Now, we live in a first world country, and the kind of problems that we generally have are far different than the kinds of problems that people in third world countries have. But guess what? They're relative. A small problem to us might cause as big of an emotional upset as someone's house being knocked down by a tsunami in a third world country in the Pacific Islands somewhere. But if that happened to us, that would be tremendous. We might not be able to handle that, but they say, oh, my house got knocked down, let's build another one. And then for us, something like, oh, I saw a text message from my boyfriend to another girl and my whole world goes upside down. Well, that's relative, right? But as we grow in our awareness, our responsibility grows, and everything becomes relative. We have to be aware of that. First world problems. Exactly. Oh, look, Stacia joined us. Hey, Stacia.
Oh, Stacia.
Nice. A face we haven't seen in a while. All right, we gotta move. Yes. So, kama loka, emotions. The consciousness is living in this world of emotions where they dissipate over time, as pleasant or unpleasant as it may be. And then the consciousness lapses into another type of just sleep after the emotional body has resolved itself and the astral body disintegrates. Then there's another stage. The consciousness will then awaken at the next higher level up. So if you remember our chart of our gradation of bodies, the mental, hey, thanks. We reference this every time. So let's see, where are we? Physical, prana, body, astral. Then we have the mental body, the higher and lower mental vehicle. So the consciousness reawakens into the mental world, and this experience after death is what is known as Devachan. What's the etymology of that? That means dwelling of the gods. Deva sometimes is referred to as, is sometimes used to refer to angels or gods. So this is more of a reward, more of a much more pleasant experience than usually is in Kamaloka. It's at the level of our soul. Now, if you recall from our discussion on this chapter, the bodies of man, the nature of the soul is very different than the nature of our lower body, our brain and our emotions. Your soul vibrates at a particular level, a particular vibrational quality, and only sympathetic vibrations can enter that world, that level of your soul. True unconditional love, bliss, purity, compassion, those types of energies vibrate at the level that the soul exists at. Nothing more coarse, nothing lower, so to speak, can even be there, can even exist at the level of our soul. So if our consciousness is there and there's no physical body to have these emotional roller coasters that we go through, the type of experience will be just that. The experience that we have there will be just what we described is the nature of the soul. And this is where many religions get the idea of a heaven world, purely blissful, completely calm and ultimate Zen life in the world of Devachan. Dwelling of the gods, comparable to heaven. After our whole being has been cleansed of emotional desires, every soul, everybody experiences this, no matter what kind of life they lived in the physical world. Theosophy teaches that even the most evil person you can imagine has some good in them. No one is 100% evil. We might think, oh gosh, they're 99.9% evil. Well, there's still 0.1% of them that has the qualities of the soul that we just described, right? So they are allotted some time in this experience of Devachan to, again, have rest and to have the energies dissipate, because even the lower mental world doesn't last from lifetime to lifetime. So even that body, the lower mental body, or kosha, the manomaya kosha, disintegrates when the physical body, when the incarnation ends, and a new lower mental body is created for the next incarnation. A concentrated essence of forces, intensity of bliss. Evil and sorrow are impossible. It's not a place, of course, but it's a state of consciousness. High energy vibrations. Sure.
The Mahatma K.H. Mentioned in one of his letters to Sinnett and Hume that Devachan is an intensely selfish experience based on all of the unselfish acts that you performed during your lifetime. So it is the recompense, the reward for everything of the highest nature that you did. That was unselfish, altruistic, compassionate, kind, and caring for other people. And yet the reward is this period of time that can be very short, almost non-existent, or can be many years. And it's the living out of the accumulated energy that you created during your lifetime of the highest nature, that which is most like that of the soul, like I said, compassion, kindness, altruism, all of those things that you did that had nothing to do with yourself are the qualities of the soul.
I'm realizing that we're using the word reward. We probably shouldn't use that word because I just finished saying that the experience in Kama Loka is certainly not a punishment. But then how is the time in Devachan a reward? It's neither one is either. It's a simple result of the actions that we do in our life. So we can view this intensity of bliss as a reward. Sure, you can view it as that, but it's a result of what we did in our life. So it's not a system of rewards and punishments. It's a natural reaction.
It's the natural effect of what you've done. Someone asked KH, can someone who is living in the physical world interact with someone who is in Devachan? Or actually the way they asked it was, can the person in Devachan help a loved one who is in the physical life who is undergoing problems? And the answer to that was, how could it be a period of bliss if they were to be preoccupied with the problems of a living person? That wouldn't be bliss at all. He said, no. He said, in their experience, everything is perfect. Everything is beautiful. Everything is wonderful. There is nothing at all to disturb that. So apparently the problems that we are experiencing in life cannot be felt by a person who is in Devachan. Perhaps while they're in Kamaloka, if you make some effort towards contacting them, they could do that, but not in Devachan. That's a very different experience.
In Kamaloka, it is actually more possible to communicate because the astral world is where we go every night when we go to sleep. And when we're sleeping, it's said that communication does happen with the deceased. However, we're not typically at a level of awakened consciousness enough to be mindful about it. It's kind of just like a dreamy, pardon the word, dreamy experience if we connect with someone. But no, in Devachan, it's at a level so far removed that there wouldn't be contact, if any.
About how long do these phases last?
Well, Kamaloka, depending on the person, can last minutes or hours, or it can last for several decades. So that's an enormous difference in time. And obviously, there is no time on any of these planes above the physical. The only way we can gauge that is by referring back to the physical world. So there's an equivalent length of time, and yet at its own level, there is no perception of time. So it's kind of bizarre, but that's the only way to explain it. And the same with Devachan. It can be practically non-existent for some people. And on the other hand, for a very wise and kind and evolved individual, it can last for probably more than a century.
Actually, I think at times you've mentioned that it can be much longer than that. It can be upwards of several hundred years.
It can be.
Could be.
It can be. And the period of time before you return depends not only on those two quantities of energy that have been built up, but also for everything being ready for your next lifetime. And we'll talk about that.
As a soul evolves more and more, they have more specific tasks to complete. And this is where this plays in. If your specific task is such that the current conditions are not ready, then the time spent in Bardo or this whole process, it might be longer before the next incarnation.
Remember, there are 2 or 3 different periods of unconsciousness during that whole Bardo period. So you're totally unaware of anything at all going on during that period. And it doesn't matter if you are unconscious for an hour or whether it's for 500 years.
It's the same thing like
doesn't make
sleep.
any difference.
When you fall asleep, and you wake up in the morning, you don't really feel the passage of 8 hours unless you're tossed and turned all night. I think Jerry had a question first. Let's have it.
I'm having such a problem with that word consciousness. It's so earthy. It's so of the body. It's so me.
Oh.
When I picture my consciousness after I'm gone, I can put my face on it. It's me, and yet I know that's not right. Wouldn't a better word be spirit or energy or soul even? It takes it away from the physical person.
The better word, I mean, a different word, I don't know that there's a better one, but a different word could be awareness. And it's not at all physical. Consciousness, the universe is conscious. We're conscious, the soul is conscious at its own level. It perceives very differently everything from what we perceive as human beings. But I don't know. I guess I'm not really understanding where the disconnect
Well,
comes from.
being conscious is being alive. Being
Okay, I
awake.
see what you mean. You're equating consciousness with brain activity,
Right.
I think. And that's the point, is that consciousness exists completely apart from the physical body and from the brain. And that's what a lot of scientists and a lot of people don't believe or don't understand. In theosophy, there is consciousness at every single level.
This is something that we opened up these sessions with a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if you were at that particular class, but one of the most important things that we can glean from this entire book is that reorientation of the body having a soul versus the soul having a body. Most of us that grew up in the Western world and grew up in any formalized religion, specifically Christianity and a few others, the human body is born and we have a soul. But all the ancient teachings flip that around the opposite way. You're the soul, which is conscious, it's aware, and you have a temporary body. So your face, yeah, it's part of you, but it's not you. Your physical body, it's temporary. It'll last, 80, 100 years, maybe a little bit more.
Then you get another face.
Okay, so the
if we-
soul has a body is a whole different way of looking at it.
Yes. And your awareness can be the soul through the practice of meditation. Now, most of us need years and maybe lifetimes of practice meditating to reach samadhi or merging with our soul. Every time we sit and meditate, that is the actual goal. First of all, we need to calm our mind down and focus on one thing. And then the teachings of Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras tell us that once we learn to first of all do that, focus on one thing, that's when the process of transcendence from the physical can happen through samadhi. And then we can realize that higher consciousness.
That experience of samadhi that one can have during meditation is the closest that we can come in the physical world to the experience in Devachan.
I have a question that's somewhat related. Last time, Terry mentioned that eternal life is consciousness. So is it all these stages that we're going through? Is it different consciousness at different levels, or because in this life we have? It's funny you asked that question. That was a question I was going to ask. So in this life we have this awareness, this consciousness, and then eternal life.
It's not a separation from consciousness, and this is only one definition of eternal life. And what I mentioned is that if you have periods of unconsciousness, just like we do during sleep, and as we do at the end of each lifetime, then in a sense we can't call that eternal life because it's all broken up. One definition of eternal life is when you have advanced enough in all of this study and practice that you have no periods of unconsciousness until vast eons of time when everyone does still go through other periods of unconsciousness. But you no longer go through periods of unconsciousness every night when you sleep or in between incarnations. So that's just one definition of eternal life.
So are you in this divine state at that point?
It's-
Where you don't?
You would be a yogi, one of the adepts. They do not experience unconsciousness like we do. Even when their physical body is asleep, they are fully active on the other levels. We aren't yet able to do that. They are.
Now, the soul doesn't die. I mean, the soul is eternal for the most part. There's a far, far in the future time when the soul doesn't exist anymore and there's something that happens there. But for our purposes here, the soul is the part of us that lives eternally. We just aren't aware of it because we fall asleep every night and we fall into unconsciousness after the physical body dies for a period of time. But the soul is there. When we achieve the ability to stay conscious in the body of our soul, in our actual causal body, it's referred to as, then we are aware of the eternal life. We're just not aware of it right now at this point. But we don't cease to exist when the physical body dies. So in that sense, we are living eternally.
In almost all higher esoteric writings, the word eternity doesn't mean forever. It means an extremely long period of time. It would be closer to the term eon. So you'll see references, for example, to 7 eternities. How could you have 7 eternities if the first one never ended? It's usually referred to as a very, very, very long period of time.
This also plays into a discussion that's coming in a future chapter about the plan and purpose of life. And you've heard it before, how our soul evolves through different kingdoms of life. The mineral kingdom, the plant, I know Jillian's heard this in our yoga teaching, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom. Now we're all in the human kingdom, and there's more. So our soul exists after we've finished all the lessons and teachings that physical life can teach humans. What's next? It's the level of the superhumans or the adepts or the enlightened beings. Now, they may or may not have a physical body, but that doesn't mean they're not alive and existing. So, wow, right?
They don't have a soul at that point.
That's
The
what
soul
we're talking
blew
about.
up.
Right. Yeah, it's been fulfilled, yeah.
But
Yeah.
remember, there's always something equivalent at a higher level. As above, so below.
Cycles and cycles and cycles. We mentioned, okay, just briefly, in a farther advanced soul, a person could choose to forego Devachan altogether and return to Earth into another incarnation quickly. That's not entirely practical for us to know right now, but it is possible as we progress. We can give up this period. It's because the other whole purpose of this, which we didn't really emphasize, is that Devachan is a period of rest. It's a period of rest before our next period of activity. It's equivalent to the winter season of the cyclical nature of the earth. Winter is a period of rest, just like this period of our life. This Devachan is a resting, kind of chilling out, relaxing for a while until we're ready to do it all over again at a little bit of a higher level next time.
It would be kind of the equivalent of 2 back-to-back shifts at work without any rest period in between.
There you go. Exactly.
It's extremely taxing on the individual, and in most cases is not allowed only in very unusual circumstances.
Or just like if a student is in school and they gave up their 3-month summer break to go right back to the next grade without a summer break. All right.
Can we actually simultaneously exist at different time periods?
Can you say that one more time? I didn't.
If we can exist simultaneously at different time periods.
I've heard a lot of people propose that. What Faye is asking is, can't they have an existence at the same time that they're experiencing that? And from everything I've heard and read and experienced, I don't see that that's possible. Maybe, I've never seen anything that HPB wrote either that indicated that that's a possibility. I know it's a very popular belief for a lot of New Age people, but I just haven't seen any confirmation of it.
what about being at the same time on different places? Just sleeping here and being somewhere else, or just being at the other places?
Well, for example, the adepts can do that. They can create a temporary body in another location.
Who can do that?
The Mahatmas, the
Yeah.
adepts, they can do that. And they are yogis. They are very advanced yogis. However, even they, as far as I know, teach that you can only be fully conscious in one location. You can't be fully conscious in two locations at once. You can be primarily conscious in one location and subliminally conscious in the other, but you can't be fully conscious in two different places.
And by the way, the last chapter of the Yoga Sutras talks about how to develop these powers. Not specifically, but more in a general sense. They're called siddhis. They're powers that are available to all people if we practice and clear our minds, and if we prove that we're an instrument for the good of the world, not just for selfish reasons. Let's make the point too that there's a difference between Devachan and heaven, in that there's no anthropomorphic God there. So an idea of a God figure in the body of a human. Also, in most religions' ideas of heaven, it's eternal, and this idea of Devachan is not eternal. It's a phase.
A lot of religions have some kind of a delineation of different degrees of heaven, the 7 degrees of heaven, or in Buddhism they talk about seven different. I forget how they term it, but there are 7 distinct levels to this Sukhavati, this after death, the equivalent of the Devachan period. So it is indicative that there are different phases to that experience.
Let's also be clear that everyone gets to go. I mentioned that earlier. Gets to go. Everyone gets a ticket. But the period of time spent there will vary depending on the amount of qualities that are dissipated and released. All right. After the period of Devachan ends, which is dependent upon each person, of course, there's another unconscious sleep. As Terry mentioned, there are several periods of unconsciousness, complete sleep, during the Bardo period. Once after the physical body dies, once after the etheric, and then once after each transcendence from one body to the next, there's a period of sleep. And then there's a last, yes?
How do you know about that?
I don't know about any of this stuff. Yeah, the information comes from several places. The great wisdom traditions of the past. It comes from near-death experiences. It comes from clairvoyance.
But you haven't been to a class before, but we always point out we can't prove this.
Yeah.
We have read these things. Thus have I heard, is the saying. And it makes...
I'm a spiritual scientist. Like, I'm like, where did this information come from? I'm going, I study it. Where did that come from? I go, I study that. So I study everything.
We like people to be wary and to be skeptical.
Be skeptical. Be skeptical. Don't believe us.
The Buddha said, don't believe anything just because I said it. He said, if something...
But that's like coming in, there is a belief, and then there is knowing. Like,
yes, exactly.
Like it's not a belief. You experience that,
But it only works if you don't set it in concrete. If you have a belief, you hold it very gently. And if the time comes that it is proved wrong or incorrect, you let it go. But if you set it in concrete, no, so-and-so said that, I believe it, and that's the way it is, you can't grow. You have just
No, I don't mean belief.
cut off your...
No.
You've just cut off your opportunity for growth when you do that. You have to be willing to let go of beliefs, just as we let go of everything. It's very yogic in its nature,
There was a
letting go.
bumper sticker that said that. It's not even-
But
It says,
God said it, I believe it, and that
That's
settles it. Yeah.
But no, this is just information that you put to the test yourself. There's never a requirement to believe anything. We're presenting it just like it's been presented to us. I can't say that I believe 100% everything that I've read, but most of it is amazing, great information, and you contemplate it, you put it to test, to work in your life, and you think to yourself, could this be true? Could this help me on my path? Okay, I'll use this for now, and if I receive new information later that discounts it or supports it, cool. Either way, it's fine.
The thing that impresses me is the way that theosophy and yoga mesh so well together. I can't imagine one without the other. Raja Yoga and Theosophy have done more to explain how life works than anything I've come across.
This is like the theory of it, the information, and then Patanjali gives us the tactics. What do I actually do to put this to work? All right, wrapping up here. There's one last little phase of awareness in the causal body or the body of the soul where we receive a glimpse, a preparation of what's to come. Now, again, we can't prove that this happens, but this is what's been taught to us. It's kind of a vision of the next incarnation. And then there becomes this desire, this divine will. The entire universe only exists because of will. There's some desire to exist and to grow at the grandest level. And that's the same will that draws us back into the flesh each time to experience more. Because I'll just come right out and say it. The purpose of life is to experience. It's to gain experience through successive earthly sessions. We have a session in one body, then we're going to have a session in many other bodies. And so there's some will, some desire for that growth, that need, that want to experience, to do more. And that's what we glimpse in this last phase of awareness before the next reincarnation starts. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do that part.
That's our 15 minutes.
Yeah, it never fails. Yeah, this might have been my
All right.
today.
So at the very end of all of this, the energy that was built up during the lifetime that required this Devachan period has diminished at some point. And the individual sinks once again into unconsciousness. And there are several things that require another incarnation. First of all, we aren't finished with life. We haven't achieved the goal of everything that can be accomplished in human form. So we still have work to do. We still have karma, for example. But there's also something called the skandhas. How many of you have heard skandha? It's a term. It's a part of Vedanta.
I think, yeah, it would be. Skandha. Skandha.
Basically, it's the desire for manifestation. And it exists not only in humans, but in animals, plants, minerals.
Strata. No, it's not strata.
No. It exists in universes. Universes also contract and go into a period of repose called pralaya. But then at some point, it has this tremendous desire to come out into manifestation again. And it does. So for us humans, that manifests as being so intent on coming back into another incarnation. Everything within us just demands this. And so in the skandhas, they say there are 5 desires. We have the desire for form or a vehicle, sensation. Imagine we all like things that taste good or feel good. So sensation, because you have gone through a long period of time without having any physical sensation whatsoever. Perception, being able to interact with the world around you. Mental form, which is different from physical form. And then consciousness. We are only partially conscious when we are not in the physical form, we as humans. The adepts are fully conscious, but we are not. So we crave something that we intuitively know that we've experienced before, all of these different things. So at some point, our being demands that we come back into incarnation. Now, when exactly we reincarnate will depend on several different things. Go ahead. Alex.
Oh, karma. That's the
Okay,
main one.
Karma is the main one, yeah. So it depends on other people too. They have their karma, they have their after-death experiences. Is it important for us to grow up side by side, sort of, as siblings, or be born at about the same time if it's a couple that will be married at some point during the next lifetime? Is it a parent-child relationship where one has to come in earlier and one a little later? Where exactly does it work? So all of these things are worked out by nature. And when everything is right, when in the outer world there is a place that accommodates your karma, both for your health, your well-being, your opportunities in life, your socioeconomic situation, and the people that you will be born with, then everything comes together. The people are born in a certain order, and everything works out the way it's supposed to. I say perfectly, not most people say, well, it's not perfect at all, but it works out perfectly as far as nature is concerned.
Perfectly imperfect.
Until we interfere with it, and then that throws everything off again. Meaning us humans, because we have free agency. Just as you said, if someone chooses to have an abortion, for example, then what was expected to happen is now thrown out, off kilter, and it will have to be readjusted somehow.
It's interesting to hear different theories and point of view. Like where I'm coming from is what understanding Earth is a school, everyone registers for their own curriculum.
Earth is a what?
School, and everyone registers for their own
Okay.
curriculum. Yeah, that's right.
Can I
At some
just
level.
ask, this is related to what I asked earlier. You mentioned eternity is not infinite. Are you saying life is not infinite?
Your existence, remember, we have always existed. So the divine spark, the divine consciousness will never end. It never had a beginning, so it will never have an end. You as a human being had a beginning, so you will have an end. Anything that has a beginning will have an end.
So there is eternity. You were saying eternity
There's
is like
Infinity, you can call it
Okay,
infinity or whatever. It's hard to come up with terms that everybody sees the same way, because we all have a little different interpretation or spin on every single word that we use.
Right.
So the main thing is that we realize that there are two different concepts. You will never cease to exist because you never
Did
not exist as a spiritual spark of divinity.
Part of God, a spark of God.
But as a form or a stage within that experience, everything will have a beginning and will have an end. But there's eternal progression. It never ends.
The period of time that we spend in the human kingdom, in the human world, is limited just like we keep coming back to the analogy of school. We don't spend eternity in elementary school. You spend a certain number of years there until you learn what lessons elementary school teaches you. Then you move on to the next phase, which would be middle school. Then the next phase, high school. Then there are more phases. The human form provides opportunity for growth in a certain range of experiences. Different experiences than a dung beetle can experience. A beetle that's walking through the forest can experience different things, but not what we can experience. And then the experience that a solar logos experiences as the ruler of a solar system experiences different things than you and I experience. So they're different vehicles. I think you experience what the solar logos does, right? You control
Yeah,
the solar system.
well, I was thinking the universe of the dung beetle is
Rolling the
to each his own, I guess.
But he has to learn lessons. How do I roll the ball down the hill? The ball of dung. That's a lesson that we don't need. We've already done that lesson. So as a human being, we don't need that lesson in school anymore. The Mahatma KH and DK, who gave us a lot of these theosophical teachings, they don't need to learn how to apply for a job and manage a business, for example, or learn how to have a girlfriend and have a family. They've done that. Those lessons they've done. They're on just managing a planet, for example. The different lessons.
Is there living Mahatma?
They're all living. Are you saying physical bodies?
Well, living like in this, right, like right now, is the.
Well, we just heard that life never ends, so of course they're living. But you're asking if they have a physical.
Well,
Mahatmas.
meaning not like an ascended master, but meaning like is the living in today's.
Some of them are. These are people who were human beings going through the same experience we do, but they reached the pinnacle or almost the pinnacle, and they are transitioning into the next phase of experience.
Mahatma, that great soul, right?
Yeah.
Like the master.
Yes. So some of them choose to come back in human bodies for their particular work. They do not interact at the current time with individuals to any great extent, except possibly individually on a very limited basis. So they're not known in the outer world. They don't make themselves known, and they don't want to be known. Their work, they're very, very busy all the time. They do behind the scenes, and if they try to prove themselves, they prefer not that people don't believe in them, because that allows them to work much more efficiently. We humans require proof of everything, so we actually interfere with their work, even if we're well intentioned, we would. So they do their work without us, or I should say they watch us and observe us, and they help wherever they can.
All right, there's one last point I'm going to
Are you
say
sure?
on this chapter. Speaking to skandhas, skandhas are what Terry said draws us back, the will, the desire to draw us back into a physical body. We're here to make the point that it's unavoidable. We're going to keep coming back. It's the chakra karma, they call it, the wheel of reincarnation. So that part of it's unavoidable, but the suffering that coming back into a physical form could provide is optional. And we believe that we have the tools to reduce the suffering almost down to zero. And that's the point of studying
those tools.
The three nons. Does anyone remember the three nons?
This is something we talk about a lot.
We made this up. Nons, N-O-N. It's kind of a little play on words that we have.
What are they?
It's practicing non-reaction,
Oh, yeah.
non-attachment, and non-judgment. If we can do those three things, we guarantee you your suffering in life will be almost zero. But they're not easy. Simply said, but challenging to do. All right,
When
let's.
you do not just like anything on that you like going to deal with you.
let's close chapter 5. This is our third
Okay.
class on chapter 5. Before we go into chapter 6, let's give Roger the stage. Roger wanted to share some ideas from HPB, the founder of the Theosophical Society. Why don't you turn that microphone on you too?
Well, I've been reading
Yeah.
Blavatsky's history, and some of the things that I've run into that I thought was quite interesting was she wrote the Isis Unveiled and also the Secret Doctrine. In both of those books, she would basically write 25 pages a day, and that was her standard. Now, when she was doing the Secret Doctrine, which she wrote, that was the last book she wrote about a year or so before she died. She took all those 25 pages per day that she had. They actually, on end to end, they were about 3 feet high, and so she was having a friend of hers review it to see if it, just how involved it would be to make it into books. And her friend said, well, why don't we take a couple of these and see on your notes, on your footnotes, how real your footnotes were. And so her footnotes in the Secret Doctrine range from 200 to 300 words. So it's not just a small little wordage. Anyway, they were in London at the time, and her friend said, well, let's go to the Library of London, and because some of those books are there, and let's see just how close what you said while you were in India, they refer back to the sources in London. So anyway, they took a dozen or so, and they were looking at them, and it was almost word for word. In fact, it was word for word, and almost all of them, except about 3 of them, the page, Blavatsky basically said, okay, they'll be in this document, they'll be on this page, and and that kind of stuff. Well, the things they ran into on about 3 of them was, instead of being on page 307, they were on page 703, and word for what she had said. So apparently when she was visualizing them as she was doing, there were some times that she didn't didn't twist those words or those numbers correctly. And other than that, and if you look at, I have the Secret Doctrine here, and you can open up just about any page. There are just lines and lines and lines of footnotes that she had put in there, and word for word, regardless of wherever they came from. Some of these were in private libraries that nobody really had an access to. Her masters, both Katumi, who was primarily the one that was helping her with this, and Moria, were quite right on with everything they said, except she was able to twist some of those numbers backwards.
The reason for that, she explained actually, and that is because looking in the Akashic record, it is on the astral plane, and she explained that it is like looking at something in a mirror. It's reversed. And so when you're looking at words or numbers, you're basically reading them backwards. And if she forgot to do that, then she just read it the way she saw it instead of flipping it.
I want to read the Akashic
Yeah, me too.
records. Thank you, Roger.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm fascinated Ivan had a good idea to get the study guide for that. Maybe our next class will be on the Secret Doctrine. All right. Let's start the next chapter.
Yay.
You don't want to do the hot letters again?
Yeah.
It only
We've got
took us 3
12
years.
minutes.
We can go a little late because we started like
I
8
know.
minutes late.
Okay.
Let's go until
Let's go 8
4:08.
minutes late.
We'll go until 4:08. All right. Chapter 6 is what's. You'll see in a second why we're laughing. What's it called? What's the chapter called?
It's called reincarnation.
And what does that word mean?
You tell us.
It's when you die and come back as a hillbilly.
Bad joke.
Terrible joke. Reincarnation.
Very bad joke. And not PC either.
Should we read the recurring dream from the book?
Mm,
We can summarize it.
summarize it.
Well, first let's break down the word reincarnation and see what it actually means. Re, which refers to again, in means into, and carne. What does that sound like? Sounds like flesh. Yes.
Meat.
So yeah, meat. So it's returning to the meat sack again and again. Sorry, very not PC again. But that's what the word actually means: coming back into the flesh again and again. Reincarnation.
I looked up a little bit about belief in reincarnation.
Who believes in it?
Well, first of all, we have to distinguish between those who believe it because of the religion that they are born into or choose, and those who just believe it as a personal belief. Worldwide, only about 7% total believe in reincarnation, apparently. I find that kind of strange, but and I'm not sure that that's correct.
That doesn't seem correct because the majority of people are either Hindu or
Certainly, yeah. 23% of people in the world believe that we simply cease to exist when we die. That we have one life, that's it. When we die, we're gone.
just black, nothing else.
26% of people say, I don't know, I have no idea.
I'll tell you when I come back.
Yeah. But on the other hand, about half do believe that there is something beyond life, after this physical life, that there is something. Some say they know what it is and some don't know. Apparently, also, just sort of as an aside, less than 40% of Americans believe in heaven and hell. Less than 40%. So the religions that teach reincarnation, and there are probably a few others: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Taoism, and Shinto are the major religions that all teach reincarnation. Among Americans, 25% of Americans believe in reincarnation. And here's another figure that I found interesting from the Pew Forum, the Pew Foundation polls that they do. 1/4 of Americans believe in reincarnation, and 24% of American Christians believe in reincarnation. It's becoming more and more popular among Christians that they think that reincarnation may be feasible.
And that's up from what John Algeo teaches, because he says in the 80s only 23% of American adults believe in it. So that's up a few percentage points.
I tried to find a little more information about how that has evolved in the last 150 years. All I could find is that during the 1700s, people in general almost never mentioned reincarnation in Europe and America. Only a few poets towards the end of the 18th century and 19th, and during the 19th century, very few people would mention it, just kind of as a, literary sort of thing. But no one really claimed in the Americas or in America to believe that much in reincarnation. So when HPB and the Theosophical Society came along in 1770, 1875. In 1776. Well, there you go. It was 99 years after the
It seemed like with Paul Revere,
Declaration of Independence. In 1875, that was really a new concept in England and in America. So the fact that a quarter of Americans believe in it now has a lot to do with the advent of the Theosophical Society and the teachings that came along with it. So even though it's a very tiny society, only about 3,500 members in the US, in the past, it has had a tremendous influence.
If more of you guys want to be members, let me know. We can.
So we can up that figure.
I'm already a member.
Okay. So just a couple of other things. Some of the other countries that have a high belief in reincarnation, America with 25%, Hungary 13%. Also fairly high percentages in Brazil, Mexico, Japan, Argentina, and Australia. Some people might find Japan to be kind of unusual, would expect there would be more interest or more belief, but Shinto is actually not that prominent in Japan. So even though Shinto teaches it, there aren't that many Japanese who are Shinto. That's it.
and it's also interesting to note under the section here, I'm jumping ahead in the chapter, but John Algeo, the author of the book, says that he has evidence that Jesus himself accepted the idea of reincarnation. He says that it's implicit in Jesus' statement to his disciples that John the Baptist was Elijah returned. And that's in Matthew 11:14, 17:10, and also in Malachi 4:5.
There are quite a few references in Gnosticism, in the Gnostic works, that would indicate a belief in reincarnation.
A couple other traditions that teach reincarnation. The ancient Egyptians were all about it. The Pythagoreans from Greece, and the Kabbalah.
And possibly the Egyptians, because they prepared their dead, if they were wealthy enough, for a future life in which they would need all of the same things they need in this life.
Well, that's also a key point, though. The idea is ancient of reincarnation. It is ancient because many of the traditions throughout the world treated their dead this way, as if there is a life after death, or as if there is something that happens, not just black, turn the lights off when the physical body dies.
There, I forget the figure, but it was quite high, the number of people who believe in something that is super physical. I wish I could remember the figure. I don't want to throw something out there, but it was quite high, the number of people who believe, and I actually found that encouraging, because I look around me and I see more and more of my friends and people that I know who believe only what science will tell them. And so I'm glad that there's a lot of people who do believe that there's more to life than just this physical world.
There is a section in this chapter called the explanatory power of reincarnation, and it's so important that John Algeo, he opens up the chapter with a major question, a conundrum that many religious people have posed, and Theosophy has an answer to it. Now, the question, it's right in the second paragraph. It's the idea of how can God allow so many variations of inequality to exist in the world if he is all loving? Now, this might be the biggest question that a religious person can ask. If we are all God's children and he loves us all equally, how is there such suffering prevalent in the world? Why are some people born with such tremendous difficulty and some people are born with such material abundance? Taking that a step further, how can there be so many people with material abundance that do bad things And how can there be so many good people who have it so hard in life? So the chapter on reincarnation opens up with this. So we can see where this might be going. The idea of reincarnation is one possible answer for this. And the entire next session, maybe 2 sessions, will be talking about how this can be possible.
Maybe 3 sessions.
Maybe 3 sessions, depending on how much we like to talk.
No, we're going to go much faster.
We could. And there's a word for this question or this conundrum:
Theodicy.
theodicy.
How many have heard that term before? Theodicy.
It comes from Greek again.
Yeah.
Theos, we all know what theos is. It means God in Greek. And dike, D-I-K-E, with a little macron over the E, means justice. So God and justice, put those words together, we have the study of the justice of God. And we have a definition from Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Theodicy means the defense of God's goodness and omnipotence in view of the existence of evil.
So just a couple of comments on this. People for centuries have gone back and forth and agonized about this question. If God is good and just and created us all, why did he make some people so much better off than other people? Why does he make some people suffer? Again, some thoughts about this. Animals don't suffer like we do, even if they have difficulties and pain. They don't obsess about it like humans do. We tend to get angry about it. Animals just, for the most part, accept whatever happens and they deal with it. And that's the natural way to do it.
They don't complain.
But we as humans have our mind that is constantly working, always try to create something that isn't there.
Why me?
We're always fantasizing about things. We're always creating false analogies, false connections. Well, if this happened, it must be because of that, or that person must have done this. We create all these things in our minds that aren't even true and don't even exist. And we obsess about things. So that's the source of suffering. If we were in tune with nature, there would really be no suffering. Because first of all, we realize that nothing happens without a cause. And that because of karma and reincarnation, we are basically responsible for everything that we're experiencing in this life, other than actions that other people take that are not involved with our karma, and they do. So we do have to keep that in mind. But for the most part, the huge majority of things that into which we were born, our social, economic situation, family members, our opportunities, our physical abilities, our physical appearance, etc., all based on our karma. I'm responsible for it. Once you understand that, what have you got to complain about? It changes everything.
You did it yourself.
So those are just kind of background things to keep in mind when we talk about reincarnation.
I want to read something which is very poignant. In the fourth paragraph here, Algeo says, although the divine, or God, certainly both transcends this world and is immanent in it, the old idea of the deity as a heavenly father, in quotes, a heavenly father who inexplicably plays cruel games with his own offspring while demanding their unquestioning love in return, is not acceptable to many of our contemporaries. And that just kind of like, it's a zinger. So that opens up the door to talk about this heavenly father who, is there this person or this human-like character who is kind of like the chess master?
It sits on a cloud.
There you go. Floats around.
Well,
Yeah.
this may be a good point to reiterate that theosophy teaches that there are gods. Not just one, but there are different levels of divinity.
And starting with us, we're a demigod.
And we, just like Mormons, teach that that we can become gods. That's a very unusual teaching.
We should differentiate though with what they mean by becoming gods and what we mean.
Yes, okay. So in theosophy, there is no individual creator who created everything. However, each realm of existence has someone who is in charge of that, a being who at one point went through the human experience, perhaps billions of years ago or trillions of years ago, who went through the same experience we're going through.
Maybe from a different.
So
Planet or
it
system.
absolutely believes that there is a conscious being in charge of each planet, in charge of each solar system, each galaxy, et cetera, all the way to infinity. So in that, we are very much in agreement. We just, as Roger says, don't believe that there's this personal interaction and a micromanagement, I call it, of obsessing about what people do in their bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. That, first of all, they don't have time for it, and second of all, they don't care. So what they care about is the entire planet, for example.
Karma takes care of the individual things, the small things.
The planet is a being also, just like the Gaia way of looking at things. So from that point of view, yes, that being uses natural law in creating this planet or this universe or whatever it is, but not creating each individual animal, simply putting into motion, getting the energies that are involved, and then directing that to some extent, but also letting it develop at its own pace and in its own way.
I think it's important for us all to decide for ourselves what we believe God is, because it's such. Eckhart Tolle says it very well. He says that he avoids using the word in all of his teachings and writings because it's so misconstrued and everyone has a different idea of what's that?
Inflammatory.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but
important to know
because
what
of
we mean.
emotions.
Right.
Which begs the question, who was Adam's father?
All right. We should probably start wrapping up. It's 4:07.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
All right. More to come on theodicy and reincarnation. I love this chapter. It's so good. I love every chapter. It explains so much about the world, about people's differences, trials and tribulations in life. All right. Thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah sent her apology. She's usually here with her crew, but she's driving. And
Oh.
I think, Jerry, you're going to take a couple books back. Did she?
Wait.
Oh, wait.
Not Jerry.
Oh, wait.
No, Carrie's been.
Oh, Jerry.
I'm Carrie.
I got confused. I'm sorry. Carol,
I'm the only one of the crew here.
you were one of the.
Yes,
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Okay,
Jerry's not here.
so this, Jerry wanted this or Deborah?
I don't know, who, no, these are.
That one is for you. We have
Oh.
the two for Deborah.
For
Are
Deborah.
you going to give them to her?
No, no.
No.
Oh, okay.
If she was Jerry, she would, but she's not Jerry.
No, I would. Did she pay for them?
Not yet. Not yet.
No, you gotta pay for them. You can take them.
No, but we trust her.